There is Cardano Europe news afoot, but it may not be as big as some people may make you think it is. Ready? Let's go. Let's give credit where credit is due. It looks like it was BitBoy who recently surfaced this news, so good job by his team over there. We're going to go a little deeper. I think there are some additional details about this Europe news that give you a fuller perspective on what this actually is and what it may not be. Here's what we're talking about. This EU project called Horizon 2020, where the EU planned on spending $80 billion. And the whole goal of the project was to make sure that the EU would be competitive with the rest of the world. So obviously, big focus on research, innovation, all those buzz terms that government officials like to use when they're doing projects like this. Here's a vital point. The vital point here is the funding was going to be available over 7 years, from 2014 to 2020. This is an important point about this project. The 7 years of funding availability are already over. Among that 80 billion that was spent over that 7-year period is this grant here. There were obviously very large number of grants doing different things. And this grant, 780477, was among them. This grant went to a group called Priviledge. Priviledge describes itself here as several European key players in cryptographic research and from the fintech and blockchain domains, uniting to push the limits of cryptographic protocols. So what's cool is here on this European Commission Cordis website, we can see exactly how much money it was and who it went to. So it looks like this is $4.5 million. And it went to several different entities you can see kind of spread across Europe, from the University of Edinburgh to Cyprus. And the Cyprus one is very relevant. You can see that shows as Input Output Research Limited. So here's the complete list of participants in this Priviledge project. We have IBM Research of Switzerland. We have an Estonian entity. We have the University of Edinburgh. We have Eindhoven University. We have Salerno University. We have another Estonian group. We have some Greek groups, and we have Input Output Research Limited of Cyprus. And they all got varying amounts of money for their contribution to this project, ranging from, it looks like, this 950,000, almost 951,000 euros, down to, is the lowest one, 120,000. And it looks like Input Output Research Limited of Cyprus got 421,210. You might be asking yourself, hey, I didn't know there was such a thing as Input Output Cyprus. I knew about Input Output Wyoming. I knew about the previous entity, Input Output Hong Kong, Input Output Global. What is this? Well, obviously, I don't know how grants work in the EU, but if they're anything like grants in North America, it really helps if the entities receiving the grants are based in the EU. So, of course, super easy for Input Output to set up a Cypriot entity and have that be the entity receiving the funds. And it looks a lot better for the EU if they're giving grants to EU-based entities. At this point, you're thinking, we knew it. This is the smoking gun, an EU Cardano deal. And wouldn't that be fantastic? I mean, we've got an EU population of maybe something like 448 million people and a nominal GDP of something like 17.1 trillion. That's compared to a country like the US, where we have a population of something like 331 million and a GDP nominal of 22.675 trillion. So this is like a United States level population and US level GDP. This is fantastic, right? Lucky for us, this project even has a website, priviledge-project.eu. And when you look at the very front page, you see they have latest publications and they have this little work, time signatures and zero knowledge proofs. And we recognize a name here. This is the chief scientist at IOHK. They've even got a partners page that lists all the entities we saw as receiving the grant money, including the University of Edinburgh and IOHK, that Cyprus-based entity of IOHK. We already know about IOHK's connections to the University of Edinburgh. Chief Scientist, University of Edinburgh. Senior Research Fellow, Philip Wadler, University of Edinburgh. Another Senior Research Fellow, same university, very strong ties. Priviledge also has a publications page, and among the publications they're claiming, we see Ouroboros Genesis. We see Ouroboros Crypsinus, proof of stake sidechains. We're familiar with all these works from IOHK. What are these guys actually doing? The language on their website seems to consistently point to distributed ledger technology and modern cryptography, fusing those two things ostensibly to the benefit of the EU. But what is it they're actually doing? So we have 4 use cases here. The first one is online voting. Then we have health insurance. Then we have university diplomas. These are going to seem very familiar. These are use cases that have been described for Cardano-based dApps like Atala Prism. Number 4, even more interesting. Number 4 right here, update mechanisms for Cardano stake-based ledgers. So you start thinking to yourself, wait a second, are these just all going to run on Cardano? All that sounds fantastic, but things start to come a little bit more into focus when we look at their prototypes and toolkits page, where they list some details about the 4 prototypes they've built around those 4 use cases. Here, even just on the first one, this is their e-voting or I-voting. They kind of use those 2 terms interchangeably throughout the website. When they describe the prototype they built around that project, we discover, oh, this is built on Hyperledger Fabric, which is the IBM-led permissioned blockchain ecosystem. And yes, IOHK is a member of Hyperledger, but so are a ton of organizations as diverse as American Express and Huawei. Going down the rest of the list, we see that the health insurance prototype is owned by GuardTime, which I believe is one of the Estonian entities. The university diploma record is built around a bunch of Greek universities. That one's open source. And we don't see any other mention of IOHK or Cardano until we get down to the final use case, which is the Cardano update use case. Don't get me wrong, there's some really cool stuff here. For instance, under the health insurance DLT use case, I love how governments always love to use these euphemisms, these euphemistic terms like DLTs. They cannot bring themselves to call it a blockchain. It has to be distributed ledger technology. So we see that under the health insurance use case, though, they're talking about zero knowledge proofs. This is fantastic. We know that IOHK is all over zero knowledge proofs. For instance, Mithril, here they're using it to prove certain things, like a patient could, certain things about a patient could be verified without, you could verify certain things about the patient without and have the other party be able to trust that verification without the other party actually seeing all the data. Similar story with the details of the diploma verification system that's been deployed for the Greek universities. You can see right here, University of Edinburgh involved, but no mention anywhere that I can find of Cardano or IOHK. So while these use cases seem very familiar to anyone in Cardano, and the fingerprints of IOHK and Cardano seem to be all over this Priviledge project, what we might be dealing with here are the deals before the deals. Do you remember at the start of this video when we said that the time period of the Horizon 2020 project was important, that 7-year period from 2014 to 2020? Well, the Cordis European Commission page for this privilege project running under this grant agreement ID of 780477 shows that this is in fact a closed project which ended last month. You combine that with the budget of only 4.5 million out of the 80 billion involved in the Horizon 2020 project, and this is starting to look like the EU just barely dipping the tip of its toe into the whole blockchain world for purposes of these use cases: voting, health insurance, academic verification, and then you've got this sort of Cardano add-on at the end. I think this is a little bit like when an auto or motorcycle manufacturer sort of takes a small amount of money, hires a design firm to do sort of a design experiment. And then they show that prototype to the world and say, hey, look, we're involved in something cool. And any decisions about whether or not to actually pursue those things are made pretty far down the road. And then projects like that actually being carried out or even further down the road. This is still a credit to IOHK and Cardano, I think, though. This is a part of what I always see with IOHK and Cardano, and that's they're constantly grinding. If there's an opportunity out there that's worth chasing, Cardano is always chasing it. If there's something to be done with zero knowledge proofs, Cardano is doing research on it. If there's something to be done in Africa, Cardano is pursuing it. If there's something to be done in Mongolia, Georgia, Cardano is on top of it. And here we have the European Union exploring these topics, and of course, Cardano is on top of it. It only makes sense that if they do pursue these things on a much scale, and we don't know, maybe they already are, that they would look to the organizations that were a part of these very small prototyping efforts. When they dipped their toe into blockchain, the organizations that were a part of that have a good chance of being a part of the larger effort. So I don't think this is evidence of a current gigantic European Union deal where the entire European Union is suddenly going to run on Cardano. But I think this is IOHK and Cardano doing what they do best, and that's constantly grinding and pursuing every single opportunity. So I don't think this is the giant Europe news that is going to change everything. But I think this is another example of Cardano and IOHK always doing the right thing. It could be that this is the thing that leads to something big, and it could even be that that big thing is already going on, but we don't currently have any evidence of any of that. I think all of that, if it were to happen, is going to come down the road. At least us knowing about it is going to come down the road. Talk to you tomorrow.